Today's topic is voice and tone. If you've got 5 minutes, I've got 5 tips to help you cultivate your own voice and to use tone in your writing. If you've been writing for any length of time now, you've probably heard people talking to you about cultivating your writer's voice, and you've probably heard people talk about the tone of your writing. And these are important concepts. They add depth and personality to your writing. They make your writing more engaging and more distinctive. One of the things that I've noticed is in many agents' bios these days, you will often see them saying that they're looking for a fresh voice, and you may not have understood what they're really talking about in terms of voice. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. But voice and tone are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. So let's make sure we understand what the differences are. Your voice is the way your personality comes through on the page. It's distinctive, it's unique. Some writers' voices are so distinctive that they only need to give you a couple of sentences and you recognize who they are. Ernest Hemingway comes to mind, Stephen King, Joseph Conrad. These are all writers whose very voice is very specific to them. Back when I was writing mainly nonfiction, it became very clear to the publishers I was working with that I had a very distinctive voice for my nonfiction work. I was working as a university professor, and most of the people who were in that position writing books in those days, and probably still these days, had very academic sounding voices, very erudite sounding voices. My voice on the page was much more conversational, and that's probably one of the reasons that one of the textbooks that I wrote some years ago, Ethics in Public Relations, is still a popular textbook these days, because it has the voice of someone who is a teacher, who is accessible and easy to understand. And that's what made my voice different. When I started writing fiction, that conversational tone carried over into my fiction. Tone, on the other hand, is the mood and emotion you create in a specific piece of writing. Even though your voice may be similar from one piece of writing to the next, the actual tone of the writing, how you want to engage the readers, what you want to make them feel, is going to be different depending upon what you're writing. The tone might be serious, it might be brooding, it might be sardonic, it might be ironic, it might be humorous, it might be wistful, formal, cheerful. All of these are different tones that you can have in your writing that can be applied to your own voice in a specific piece. So voice and tone are both essential to your writing. They are closely related, but they are not the same thing. And I have 5 tips that might help you cultivate your voice and apply tone in your writing. Tip number 1, study authors that you admire. Take some time to actually read and look at those authors and how they put things together on the page. Analyze how they use language, sentence structure, pacing, all of the things that create voice in one's writing. Obviously, you're not going to copy their style, but that doesn't mean that you can't understand and learn some things from the style of another writer. In fact, you can learn a lot about style by studying writers you like. And as for tone, when you're looking at authors' writing, you might look at one author and read several pieces by that same author, listening to the voice and understanding that the tone might vary from one to another. Tip number 2, read your favorite authors and your own work out loud. Voice is something that you have to hear. Think about it. When you're thinking about people's voices in a social situation, you're listening to them. You're hearing what they're saying, but you're also hearing how they say it. So you're going to want to read your own writing and other authors' writing to hear how it sounds. I would suggest that you take a piece of your writing from a few years ago, read that out loud, and then immediately afterwards pick up a piece of recent writing and read that and listen to it. Ask yourself whether or not your voice has developed or whether or not it's becoming richer and more unique to you. Tip number 3, practice consistently. This rule, this tip, applies to many things about writing. Practicing consistently is very important, but it's particularly important when you're trying to develop your unique voice and understand how the tone of your writing varies from one piece to the next. You just have to keep practicing it and listening to your own writing. And over time, you will find what sounds most authentic and most effective to you. Tip number 4, use your natural voice. Write the way you speak. Let your personality shine through. That's your uniqueness. That's who you are. That's what's going to make your piece of work in the same genre as someone else's different. Sounds different to the readers. If you're humorous in the way you speak, infuse humor into your writing. If you're thoughtful and introspective, bring that to your writing. That's cultivating your unique voice. I think it's fair to say that authenticity is probably the key to developing your consistent and compelling voice. Tip number 5, experiment with different tones. As you're developing your voice, write some pieces and then try to change the tone of it. In my own writing, I do have a consistent voice, but it varies in terms of tone from one piece to another, particularly when I'm writing fiction versus nonfiction. That tone that I bring to it is going to possibly be a little bit more formal when I'm writing a textbook, for example, and less formal, but yet the voice, that conversational tone that is part of my own style, is always there. So take a piece of work and try writing it in a conversational tone, in a formal tone, in an authoritative tone, in a whimsical tone. Try those different tones to the same piece of writing and then read it out loud, see what it sounds like. When you develop this kind of flexibility, it demonstrates that you can take your voice and apply it to a different kind of writing. This flexibility demonstrates your versatility as a writer. And being versatile in your writing can be very useful for you as you develop your writing career. So your individual voice and the tone that you use of that voice helps to connect emotionally to your readers. And of course you want to connect emotionally to them on some level, regardless of what you're writing, so that they will want to read your writing and more of it. So good luck with developing your writer's voice. Happy writing. Subscribe to Write, Fix, Repeat, and maybe I can help you improve your writing knowledge and skills. 5 tips at a time.